So my wife found a bunch of Edgar Rice Burroughs books at the thrift store here, and has picked them up. And we managed to get the entire Venus series, I believe. At least, unless there were other ones that were published after this little list inside the book, which there could be. But we got this whole series, so I thought we'd maybe do this. So it's Pirates of Venus, Lost on Venus, Carson of Venus, Escape on Venus, The Wizard of Venus. So Edgar Rice Burroughs is a very prolific author. He wrote a bunch of Tarzan books. He wrote these books. He wrote like the John Carter on Mars books. So there's tons of he's just got loads and loads and loads of books. There's so many. Anyways, it is time for us to start now. So welcome to Logan Reads Live this lovely Wednesday. We are going to be reading the first chapter of Pirates of Venus by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and we're going to be reading one of the poems from the best poems ever, one you've probably heard of, Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. But first, of course, Logan Reads Live is presented by Rosalyn Jane, and we have a new featured item today, the Three Kids shirt. This classic Three Kids shirt is made from soft cotton and features a fun saying for any mom of three kids. I think it could work for dad of three kids as well. The short sleeve crew neck design is comfortable to wear, and I'm sure to bring and is sure to bring a smile to all who see it. The saying, of course, says, "I was normal 3 kids ago." Now, I can't claim that myself, but some people may. All right, we will now go to Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll, which I didn't realize until now, and I'll probably forget this again. But Carroll and Lewis Carroll spelled with two R's and two L's, which for those of you who know that are like, well, of course, duh. But for me, I was like, that's kind of weird. All right, anyways, Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borough groves, and the mome raths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious Bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the manxome foam he sought. So rested he by the Tumtum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffing through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker snack. He left it dead, and with his head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. O frabjous day, callooh, callay, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borough groves, and the mome raths outgrabe. So, this poem, of course, is an example of nonsense words that convey a meaning just from the sound of them. That they sort of you probably have an image that comes to mind of these things. I mean, now, of course, this poem has been put into video form, and so you may be corrupted by that. But the the words that he's created here just have a sound to them that can make something come to mind. And there was an event in my extended family a number of years ago where we had there were cupcakes at a family gathering around Valentine's Day, and they had those little sweethearts on them with the little sayings. And each one of the cupcakes had three sweethearts on them, and one of them said it had three hearts that said "Kiss me," "Too late," "Trop tard." And of course, "Trop tard" is French "trop tard" or something like that, that means too late. But whoever had the cupcake asked, "What does trop tard mean?" Because, of course, we speak English primarily, and that's what that would sound like. And I initially, and most of the other people, didn't know what this. I don't remember who had the cupcake, so I can't even out them if I wanted to. We didn't have any response to that, really, but trop tard doesn't sound very good. And so it became a bit of a saying with certain members in my family, where a trop tard is someone that misses an opportunity because they are too late to take it. They have an opportunity, but they delay and delay until that opportunity is lost. It's a trop tard, and it just has that kind of negative sound to it. Of course, it was in the context of "Kiss Me Too Late, Trop Tard." So, there you go. There's a little bit of trivia about an incident in my family that I've always thought was funny, and I like the term. All right, we will now go to the feature presentation of Logan Reads Live this wonderful Wednesday, Chapter 1 of The Pirates of Venus. Carson Napier. If a female figure in a white shroud enters your bedchamber at midnight on the 13th day of this month, answer this letter. Otherwise, do not. Having read this far in the letter, I was about to consign it to the wastebasket, where all my crank letters go, but for some reason I read on. If she speaks to you, please remember her words and repeat them to me when you write. I might have read on to the end, but at this juncture the telephone bell rang, and I dropped the letter into one of the baskets on my desk. It chanced to be the out basket, and had events followed their ordinary course, this would have been the last of the letter and the incident insofar as I was concerned, for from the out basket the letter went to the files. It was Jason Gridley on the telephone. He seemed excited and asked me to come to his laboratory at once. As Jason is seldom excited about anything, I hastened to accede to his request and satisfy my curiosity. Jumping into my roadster, I soon covered the few blocks that separate us to learn that Jason had good grounds for excitement. He had just received a radio message from the inner world from Pelicanor. On the eve of the departure of the great dirigible 0220 from the Earth's core, following the successful termination of that historic expedition, Jason had determined to remain and search for Von Horst, the only missing member of the party. But Tarzan, David Innes, and Captain Zuppner had persuaded him of the folly of such an undertaking, inasmuch as David had promised to dispatch an expedition of his own native Pelicadarian Pelicadarian warriors to locate the young German lieutenant if he still lived and it were possible to discover any clue to his whereabouts. Notwithstanding this, and though he had returned to the outer world with the ship, Jason had always been harassed by a sense of responsibility for the fate of Von Horst, a young man who had been most popular with all the members of the expedition and had insisted time and time again that he regretted having left Policadar until he had exhausted every means within his power of rescuing Von Horst or learned definitely that he was dead. Jason waved me to a chair and offered me a cigarette. "I've just had a message from Abner Perry," he announced. "The first for months." "It must have been interesting," I commented, "to excite you." "It was," he admitted. "A rumor has reached Sari that Von Horst has been found." Now, as this pertains to a subject entirely foreign to the present volume, I might mention that I have alluded to it only for the purpose of explaining two facts which, while not vital, have some slight bearing on the remarkable sequence of events which followed. First, it caused me to forget the letter I had mentioned, and second, it fixed the date in my mind, the 10th. My principal reason for mentioning the first fact is to stress the thought that the matter of the letter, so quickly and absolutely forgotten, had no opportunity to impress itself upon my mind, and therefore could not, at least objectively, influence my consideration of ensuing events. The letter was gone from my mind within 5 minutes of its reading as completely as though it had never been received. The next 3 days were exceedingly busy ones for me, and when I retired on the night of the 13th, my mind was so filled with the annoying details of a real estate transaction that was going wrong that it was some time before I could sleep. I can truthfully affirm that my last thoughts were of trust deeds, receivers in equity, and deficiency judgments. What awoke me, I do not know. I sat up with a start just in time to see a female figure, swathed in what appeared to be a white winding sheet. Enter my room through the door. You will note that I say door rather than doorway, for such was the fact. The door was closed. It was a clear, moonlit night. The various homely objects in my room were plainly discernible, especially the ghostly figure now hovering at the foot of my bed. I am not subject to hallucinations. I had never seen a ghost. I had never wished to. And I was totally ignorant of the ethics governing such a situation. Even had the lady not been so obviously supernatural, I should yet have been at a loss as to how to receive her at this hour in the intimacy of my bedchamber, for no strange lady had ever before invaded its privacy, and I am of Puritan stock. "It is midnight of the 13th," she said, in a low, musical voice. "So it is," I agreed, and then I recalled the letter that I had received on the 10th. "He left Guadalupe today," she continued. "He will wait in Guaymas for your letter." That was all. She crossed the room and passed out of it, not through the window, which was quite convenient, but through the solid wall. I sat there for a full minute, staring at the spot where I had last seen her and endeavoring to convince myself that I was dreaming. But I was not dreaming. I was wide awake. In fact, I was so wide awake that it was fully an hour before I had successfully wooed Morpheus, as the Victorian writers so neatly expressed it, ignoring the fact that his sex must have made it rather embarrassing for gentlemen writers. I reached my office a little earlier than usual the following morning, and it is needless to say that the first thing that I did was to search for that letter which I had received on the 10th. I could recall neither the name of the writer nor the point of origin of the letter, but my secretary recalled the letter having been sufficiently out of the ordinary to attract his attention. Was from somewhere in Mexico, he said, and as letters of this nature are filed by states and countries, there was now no difficulty in locating it. You may rest assured that this time I read the letter carefully. It was dated the 3rd and postmarked Guaymas. Guaymas is a seaport in Sonora on the Gulf of California. Here is the letter. My dear sir, being engaged in a venture of great scientific importance, I find it necessary to solicit the assistance, not financial, of some one psychologically harmonious who is at the same time of sufficient intelligence and culture to appreciate the vast possibilities of my project. Why I have addressed you, I shall be glad to explain in the happy event that a personal interview seems desirable. This can only be ascertained by a test, which I shall now explain. If a female figure in a white shroud enters your bedchamber at midnight on the 13th day of this month, answer this letter. Otherwise, do not. If she speaks to you, please remember her words and repeat them to me when you write. Assuring you of my appreciation of your earnest consideration of this letter, which I realize is rather unusual, and begging that you hold its contents in strictest confidence until future events shall have warranted its publication. I am, sir, very respectfully yours, Carson Napier. It looks to me like another nut, commented Rothman. So it did to me on the 10th, I agreed, but today is the 14th, and now it looks like another story. What has the 14th got to do with it? He demanded. Yesterday was the 13th, I reminded him. You don't mean to tell me? He started skeptically. That is just what I do mean to tell you, I interrupted. The lady came, I saw, she conquered. Ralph looked worried. Don't forget what your nurse told you after your last operation, he reminded me. Which nurse? I had 9, and no two of them told me the same things. That one hits a little close to home. I've experienced that before. Jerry, she said that narcotics often affected a patient's mind for months afterward. His tone was solicitous. Well, at least Jerry admitted that I had a mind, which some of the others didn't. Anyway, it didn't affect my eyesight. I saw what I saw. Please take the letter to Mr. Napier. A few days later, I received a telegram from Napier dated Guaymas. Letter received. Stop. Thanks. Stop. Shall call you on tomorrow. It read. He must be flying, I commented. Or coming in a white shroud, suggested Ralph. I think I'll phone Captain Hodson and send a squad car around here. Sometimes these nuts are dangerous. He was still skeptical. I must admit that we both awaited the arrival of Carson Napier with equal interest. I think Ralph expected to see a wild eyed maniac. I could not visualize the man at all. About 11 o'clock the following morning, Ralph came into my study. Mr. Napier is here, he said. Does his hair grow straight out from his scalp, and do the whites of his eyes show all around the irises? I inquired, smiling. No, replied Ralph, returning the smile. He is a very fine looking man, but, he added, I still think he is a nut. Ask him to come in, and a moment later, Ralph ushered in the exceptionally handsome man, whom I judged to be somewhere between 25 and 30 years old, though he might have been even younger. He came forward with extended hand as I rose to greet him, a smile lighting his face, and after the usual exchange of banalities, he came directly to the point of his visit. To get the whole picture clearly before you, he commenced, I shall have to tell you something about myself. My father was a British Army officer, my mother an American girl from Virginia. I was born in India while my father was stationed there, and brought up under the tutorage of an old Hindu who was much attached to my father and mother. This Chand Kabi was something of a mystic, and he taught me many things that are not in the curriculums of schools for boys under 10. Among them was telepathy, which he had cultivated to such a degree that he could converse with one in psychological harmony with himself quite as easily at great distances as when face to face. Not only that, but he could project mental images to great distances, so that the recipient of his thought waves could see what Chand Kabi was seeing, or whatever else Chand Kabi wished him to see. These things he taught me. And it was thus you caused me to see at midnight. Sorry. And it was thus you caused me to see my midnight visitor on the 13th? I inquired. He nodded. That test was necessary in order to ascertain if we were in psychological harmony. Your letter, quoting the exact words that I had caused the apparition to appear to speak, convinced me that I had at least found the person for whom I have been searching for some time. But to get on with my story, I hope I am not boring you, but I feel that it is absolutely necessary that you should have full knowledge of my antecedents and background in order that you may decide whether I am worthy of your confidence and assistance or not. I assured him that I was far from being bored, and he proceeded. I was not quite 11 when my father died, and my mother brought me to America. We went to Virginia first and lived there for 3 years with my mother's grandfather, Judge John Carson, with whose name and reputation you are doubtless familiar, and who is not. After the grand old man died, mother and I came to California, where I attended public schools and later entered a small college at Claremont, which is noted for its high scholastic standing and the superior personnel of both its faculty and student body. Shortly after my graduation, the third and greatest tragedy of my life occurred. My mother died. I was absolutely stunned by this blow. Life seemed to hold no further interest for me. I did not care to live, yet I would not take my own life. As an alternative, I embarked upon a life of recklessness. With a certain goal in mind, I learned to fly. I changed my name and became a stuntman in pictures. I did not have to work, though my mother had inherited a considerable oh sorry. Through my mother, I had inherited a considerable fortune from my great grandfather John Carson. So great a fortune that only a spendthrift could squander the income. I mention this only because the venture I am undertaking requires considerable capital, and I wish you to know that I am amply able to finance it without help. Not only did life in Hollywood bore me, but here in Southern California were too many reminders of the loved one I had lost. I determined to travel, and I did. I flew all over the world. In Germany, I became interested in rocket cars and financed several. Here, my idea was born. There was nothing original about it except that I intended to carry it to a definite conclusion. I would travel by rocket to another planet. My studies had convinced me that of all the planets, Mars alone offered presumptive evidence of habitability for creatures similar to ourselves. I was at the same time convinced that if I succeeded in reaching Mars, the probability of my being able to return to Earth was remote. Feeling that I must have some reason for embarking upon such a venture other than selfishness, I determined to seek out someone with whom I could communicate in the event that I succeeded. Subsequently, it occurred to me that this might also afford the means for launching a second expedition equipped to make the return journey. For I had no doubt but that there would be many adventurous spirits ready to undertake such an excursion once I had proved it feasible. For over a year, I have been engaged in the construction of a gigantic rocket on Guadalupe Island off the west coast of Lower California. The Mexican government has given me every assistance, and today everything is complete to the last detail. I am ready to start at any moment. As he ceased speaking, he suddenly faded from view. The chair in which he had been sitting was empty. There was no one in the room but myself. I was stunned, almost terrified. I recalled what Rothman had said about the effect of the narcotics upon my mentality. I also recalled that insane people seldom realize that they are insane. Was I insane? Cold sweat broke out upon my forehead and the backs of my hands. I reached toward the buzzer to summon Ralph. There is no question but that Ralph is sane. If he had seen Carson Napier and shown him into my study, what a relief that would be. But before my finger touched the button, Ralph entered the room. There was a puzzled expression on his face. "Mr. Napier is back again," he said, and then it added, "I didn't know he had left. I just heard him talking to you." I breathed a sigh of relief as I wiped the perspiration from my face and hands. If I was crazy, so was Ralph. "Bring him in," I said, "and this time you stay here." When Napier entered, there was a questioning look in his eyes. "Do you fully grasp the situation as far as I have explained it?" he asked, as though he had not been out of the room at all. "Yes, but," I started. "Wait, please," he requested. "I know what you are going to say, but let me apologize first and explain. I have not been here before. That was my final test. If you are confident that you saw me and talked to me and can recall what I said to you as I sat outside in my car, then you and I can communicate just as freely and easily when I am on Mars." "But," interjected Rothman, "you were here. Didn't I shake hands with you when you came in and talked to you?" "You thought you did," replied Napier. "Who's loony now?" I inquired inelegantly. But to this day, Rothman insists that we played a trick on him. "How do you know he's here now, then?" he asked. "I don't," I admitted. "I am this time," laughed Napier. "Let's see, how far had I gotten?" "You were saying that you were all ready to start, had your rocket set up on Guadalupe Island," I reminded him. "Right, I see you got it all. Now, as briefly as possible, I'll outline what I hope you will find it possible to do for me. I have come to you for several reasons, the more important of which are your interest in Mars, your profession — the results of my experiment must be recorded by an experienced writer — and your reputation for integrity. I have taken the liberty of investigating you most thoroughly. I wish you to record and publish the messages you receive from me and to administer my estate during my absence. I shall be glad to do the former, but I hesitate to accept the responsibility of the latter assignment," I demurred. "I have already arranged a trust that will give you ample protection," he replied in a manner that precluded further argument. I saw that he was a young man who brooked no obstacles. In fact, I think he never admitted the existence of an obstacle. "As for your remuneration," he continued, "you may name your own figure." I waved a deprecatory hand. "It will be a pleasure," I assured him. "It may take a great deal of your time," interjected Ralph, "and your time is valuable." "Precisely," agreed Napier. Mr. Rothman and I will, with your permission, arrange the financial details later. That suits me perfectly, I said, for I detest business and everything connected with it. Now, to get back to more important and far more interesting phases of our discussion, what is your reaction to the plan as a whole? Mars is a long way from Earth, I suggested. Venus is 9 or 10 million miles closer, and a million miles are a million miles. Yes, I would prefer going to Venus, he replied. Enveloped in clouds, its surface forever invisible to man, it presents a mystery that intrigues the imagination. But recent astronomical research suggests that, sorry, conditions there inimical, inimical. I don't know that word at all. Conditions inimical to the support of any life, such as we know on Earth. It has been thought by some that held in the grip of the sun since the era of her pristine fluidity, she always presents the same face to him, as does the moon to the Earth. If such is the case, the extreme heat of one hemisphere and the extreme cold of the other would preclude life. Even if the suggestion of Sir James Jean's is borne out by fact, each of her days and nights is several times as long as ours on Earth. These long nights have a temperature of 13 degrees below zero Fahrenheit, and the long days a correspondingly high temperature. Yet, even so, life might have adapted itself to such conditions, I contended. Man exists in equatorial heat and Arctic cold. But not without oxygen, said Napier. Sir John has estimated that the amount of oxygen above the cloud envelope that surrounds Venus is less than 1/10 of 1% of the terrestrial amount. After all, we have to bow to the superior judgment of such men as Sir James Jeans, who says the evidence, for what it is worth, goes to suggest that Venus, the only planet in the solar system outside Mars and the Earth on which life could possibly exist, possesses no vegetation and no oxygen for higher forms of life to breathe, which definitely limits my planetary exploration to Mars. We discussed his plans during the remainder of the day and well into the night, and early the following morning he left for Guadalupe Island in his Sikorsky amphibian. I have not seen him since, at least in person. Yet, through the marvelous medium of telepathy, I have communicated with him continually and seen him amid strange, unearthly surroundings that have been graphically photographed upon the retina of my mind's eye. Thus, I am the medium through which the remarkable events of Carson Napier are being recorded on Earth. But I am only that. Like a typewriter or a dictaphone, the story that follows is his. And we will continue with chapter 2, Off for Mars, another day, probably next week. Perhaps I will just do these books on Wednesdays. One of the things that I did not know is that this is like this. Obviously, this first chapter has referenced um, that one book of his, which we also have, and I have not read. What was it called? Plus something, follicular or something like that. Yeah, Pelucidar, Pelucidar. I don't know. But that's a book as well, which we have that he wrote. And obviously, there's some sort of combined universe of these books because Tarzan was mentioned. I'm sure that the grandfather is John Carter of Mars. And so we've got these several book series all connected together. So just something that I found interesting there. And maybe I'll try to look up at how you're supposed to pronounce that Pellucidar, although it's unlikely to come up again. But I think the way this is written at the beginning is sort of like, hey, I've got other book series you should check out too. It's funny when books are written like that. But with someone who writes as many books as Edgar Rice Burroughs did, I'm not surprised that that happened. Anyways, thank you so much for coming and listening and watching Logan Reads Live, which is, of course, presented by Rosalyn Jane. And we are featuring now the Three Kids shirt. It's a classic shirt that is made from soft cotton and features a fun saying for any mom or dad of three kids. Well, or more than 3 kids, but you need at least 3 kids. The short sleeve crew neck design is comfortable to wear and is sure to bring a smile to all who see it. Saying, of course, is, "I was normal 3 kids ago." Anyways, thank you so much for coming. I hope you have a lovely night, and we hope to see you again. Although I have not yet figured out what I'm going to do tomorrow or Friday. I'll probably do tomorrow earlier in the day. Friday, I may try to pre-record something for you. But anyways, yeah, tomorrow I will most likely just do late in the afternoon uh, for Thursday, and we'll figure something out for Friday. Anyways, thank you so much. You have a good night. Bye for now.